All right, welcome to the third episode of the Phantom Punch podcast. This time, Kick and I will be previewing the co-main event of UFC 317. Kick us off with your reads of Alexandre Pantoja.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Yeah, Pantoja, it's kind of beaten to death, at least in our circles, but he's just really underappreciated. He's such a fun fighter every time he goes out. And when you're looking at his last matchup against Asakura, he really did look very, very good. And when you're assessing Pantoja's game, it's kind of simple in seeing the things he does well and also some of his deficiencies. Kind of like we talked about in our Bilal JDM podcast, and we've talked about this offline as well, is that Pantoja is sort of in the mold of these champions who are exceptional in at least one phase of grappling. He's probably the best out of all of that crop of champions, like DDP, like Marab, but do have some deficiencies on the feet and kind of make up for it by just being either a physical hoss, really durable, all these other sorts of things. So when you're assessing him, it's kind of simple in a way because he has some of the best back taking in the sport, some of the best back retention in the sport. And he's just incredible there, very potent there. He's also not bad on top, especially top half guard, which we saw in the Brandon Royval fight. And in terms of striking, he has a lot of good tactical reads, like a lot of these other champions that I was referencing, where especially in both the Urseg and the Asakura fights, he'll often get them moving backwards because he does just tend to blitz forward with these running kind of silly looking combinations that don't get punished all that often, or they do get punished, but he kind of just no-sells it because he's just kind of made of metal. And he just doesn't seem to actually absorbs the damage is rather what I'd say. And this will often bring them to the fence where he can just enter on the hips, get to the back, start his crab riding series. But also, when he gets them moving backwards, he has a lovely body kick that he catches them as they retreat back on a straight line, which I think will be notable against Kai Kara France. And if anything is really slick on the feet, it's definitely his transitional game and some of his work in the clinch, whether that's with trips, whether that's with knees. His transitional offense and his opportunistic offense within those transitional moments is really, really good. And he's always very crafty from there, always trying new things. I think I got most of his game down in a broad sense.
Now I'll talk about Kai Kara France. So I actually briefly talked about France's offense in Fight Mind with our boy JDK. Make sure you follow him. So Kai's offense is dedicated to punishing level changes and preventing level changes. And he mainly relies on his rear uppercut and his body jab. And the way he uses his body jab is he'll split the jab. For those listening, that means that when the opponent jabs at you, you slip outside of their jab and then simultaneously jab back. Kai Kara France is using a body jab. He'll slip the opponent's jab and then body jab and body jab. When his opponents start to jab back at him consistently, then he'll come over the top with a cross counter. So he uses the body jab to get reads, and the reads he's often looking for is the rear hand parry, so he can follow up with the jab upstairs. Or like I said earlier, he's trying to get his opponents to jab back at him so he can come over the top with a cross counter. And this is a common look for the CKB boys, but he also likes to throw the jab at his opponent's rear hand to get reads. Ambient movement wise, like during the dead space of a fight. So if you guys don't know what that means, reference Phantom Punch podcast episode 1. Kick talks about the dead space of a fight a lot with JDM. In regards to that, Kai Kara France, he's an east-west fighter that concedes a lot of space. Slowly concedes space since he's always looking for the cross counter. But when his opponents stop reacting, this is like one of the more annoying habits, but it's also effective for him. He'll shift in with his punches, like similar to Volkanovski. I think James Krause summed up his game really well in the second Moreno fight in the corner. He had a really good read on like what Kai wants to do, and he said it perfectly. He just wants to counter with the overhand and kick his legs. This is something to consider. grappling wise, when he fought Amir Albazi and Askar Askarov, he gave up his back a lot, which again, that's something that Kick mentioned earlier. That's something to consider against Pantoja because that is what Pantoja is looking for, and he's probably the best at it in the flyweight division. And his defense when on his back is pretty standard. When you watch the Askarov fight back, he's Kai's just trying to get a 2-on-1, and then he's pulling that over his head for a baseball bat grip just to turn over and get top position. And most of the time, he didn't get it. And his defense along the fence against Amir Albazi looked pretty good. He turned in on Albazi and attained head height. And then when Albazi goes for the near side hook off the fence, he'll turn in and then he'll scramble to top position, that was good to see. So that'll be interesting against Pantoja. And with that, I'll hand it over to Kick with his hypothetical game plan for Pantoja against Kai France.
Great reads on Kai's game. Like you said, when they do stop reacting, he'll have these big shifting punches, and those I think tend to be his most significant. Those tend to be his most significant lands, at least early on in the fight, especially in the Usyk fight, the Moreno fight. He can catch them with those shifting combinations. When looking at him versus Pantoja, it is good to consider, like you said, he has very, very competent and standard back defense. He was always looking to, like you said, get head height. He was always fighting the top hand of the choke. And he was also always focusing on committing one hand to breaking the body triangle, standing up and breaking the body triangle, which was good. Those are all good things to do. But at the end of the day, it is still just defense. So he can probably survive against Pantoja. But like you said, the thing that I noticed is in the dead spaces, he's tending to move side to side. He's using a lot of that lateral movement in the dead spaces. But when an opponent comes in on him with some sort of blitz, you saw this with Moreno, you see this against a lot of his opponents, he will back up in that straight line. And that's kind of the normal reaction for most people when your opponent comes in on a blitz. And this plays pretty nicely with Pantoja's game, who he has these nice technical moments, whether he's following you with the body kick, whether he's actually checking kicks in space and then punching you off of them, whether he has a pretty good leg kick of his own. He has a lot of these nice little weapons that he finds openings for throughout a fight. In those dead spaces, he will get cracked himself many times. He just kind of seems to no-sell it. And of course, that's the question with Pantoja is kind of when is this train gonna stop? When is he finally gonna get cracked? Because he will get cracked. That's almost an assured possibility, especially against KKF, who commits a lot of his weight to his punches, especially when he's shifting. And that's why he drops people. That's why he's one of the flyweights that drops people, because he's committing a lot of his weight to those punches. If Pantoja isn't, if his chin's not done, if he's good, it's hard for me to see how KKF deals with his somewhat silly looking shifting combination, not even shifting, just running forward with his straights, because that's how he usually gets people to the fence. And Kai will concede that space to move back to the fence. And as we saw in the Asakura fight, and Asakura looked gigantic against him. He was able to grab a single off of a flying knee, which I don't see KKF do all that often, but it's always there against Pantoja. But he'll get on the hips and he'll find his way to the back and he'll start that crab ride series. And it's hard for me to see a consistent way for KKF to build his game. I can see him, cracking with cross counter. He might be able to pepper his legs from range, but Pantoja's okay at defending leg kicks. So I think he can come in with what he usually does, given that he can actually absorb the damage, just kind of run him ragged by probably like the third round, because that's kind of what he does. It's what you saw in the Usyk fight. Even though Usyk was competitive through all that, Pantoja just, if he's moving forward and kind of coming out like a bat out of hell, Kai's defensive reactions play into his game pretty well.
That's a really good read that Pantoja just doing his regular game matches really well with Kai. I think you're completely right there. I think Kai is the one that's going to have to make a lot of bigger adjustments than Pantoja is. For Kai in this, I would say don't shift as much and don't concede as much space like he normally does. Because like I said earlier, and like you just mentioned, Kai, he will slowly concede space because he's moving side to side a lot. And not only does he use the side to side movement to set up his cross counter, he's also trying to find an angle for his low kicks. I don't think that's something you really want to do low kicks against Pantoja, because you're pretty much giving him like a leg catch opportunity. A lot of times, Kaikara France, he'll put himself to the cage without a lot of pressure on him
Yes, exactly.
because he's trying to get so many reads. The way he relieves pressure when his back is along the fence is to shift into punches, and that's really bad against Pantoja because Pantoja can get a body lock from there, maybe even shuck and get to his back, which you don't want to give Pantoja those opportunities. So I would say stay committed with the body jab and right hand to the body if it presents himself, like he did in the Usyk fight. And then I'd say find your cross counter late. Pantoja, like we said earlier, he has one thing in his striking, and that's just double right hands. The way to exploit that, I think France can probably debase him a lot of the time, but he's going to have to be careful with this. I suggest to counter that is to kick the inside of the leg as he steps in into the opposite stance. When Pantoja shifts in, he'll be in his new southpaw stance. Kai would have to use his rear leg inside low kick, which is a long weapon, but because Pantoja is shifting in, he'll be fully committed. There's a chance to debase him there. That's really on Kai's timing, and it'll be interesting to see if they drilled that specific count to Pantoja's blitzes. Out, I have a feeling this can be extremely messy on the feet since both these guys like to shift in with their right hands. What do you think?
100%. The thing with that inside low kick is you saw Kaya Sakura use it a couple times, but the other thing is that he was throwing a committed step up inside low kick. Kai is kind of just using it like a lot of the city kickboxing guys do as just like kind of like a peppery attack, which leaves him a lot more vulnerable in that situation. You can definitely debase him on his blitzes with that low kick, but if it's not committed enough, then you're just leaving yourself on one foot for Pantoja to kind of crash into the clinch, get you up against the fence, and start his whole crab shuck to the back crab ride series.
Probably the last question of the podcast. Do you think that Kai has to make all these necessary adjustments while Pantoja just can be himself?
It's worked for Pantoja thus far, where he likes to find certain things. He's doing that double right hands, walking combinations. But in those more dead spaces of the fight, he does find some cool things that work for him. He does seem to at least get an idea of what to do throughout the fight. What he usually does, I think, just plays into Kai's defensive reactions well. And Kai really probably will crack him with some big, really committed shifting punches because he swings on those. But at the same time, like you said, you saw Moreno. I think Moreno and Askarov, I think, both took his back from things like that. At their very least, if they didn't take his back, they entered the body lock. You're just giving him an opportunity to do that, especially when you're shifting off of the cage when you're already being pressured.
A shot that we don't really see from Kaikara France is the uppercut to the body. Mm-hmm. And I think that might be helpful here because like you said earlier, like Pantoja just likes to crash in. One of the ways to prevent that is to use the uppercut to the body, and that'll give him the underhook for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, that would be a great weapon. You see other great anti-grappling performances use that, and he is coming from a good team. I just don't know. It's hard to see that sort of thing because, of course, anybody can change. Easy to be surprised in MMA, and it's wonderful when you are. But his defensive reactions, I think, just do play into what Pantoja likes to do very well.
I completely agree. And with that, I think we'll close it out with the third episode of the Phantom Punch podcast. Thank you, Kick. For the next one, for tomorrow's podcast, we will go over the main event. See you guys.
See ya.